Hey Summoners, welcome back to another Wild Rift video. My name is Tia and today we'll be going over the 5 best champions for you to main on patch 2.1. These champions will be relatively decent to strong picks that have heaps of skill expression and you'll be able to learn new things about them for thousands of games. But enough talking, let's get straight into it. Our first champion we recommend that you pick up as your main is Yasuo, the Unforgiven. Yasuo has limitless skill expression in his kit, and there's countless different ways you can chain his abilities together to create fancy outplays and highlight moments. The primary reason that Yasuo is a champion that is excellent to main is his third ability, Sweeping Blade. This is how you will demonstrate your mechanical ability and strong control over your champion. You can also show off your foresight and reaction time by maneuvering around enemy abilities and dashing into places where it's difficult or impossible for enemy champions to hit you. Intelligent Sweeping Blade usage is critical for both Yasuo's teamfighting and his early game. In the early game, positioning yourself well so that you can dash across minions to engage fights on the enemy laner and still have your dash on them ready to continue chasing while also using dashes to stay in range for more auto attacks and dodge abilities is extremely difficult. There's also optimizations to make and different strategies to adopt, and you'll find as you grind out hundreds of Yasuo games that you're still changing up the way you play around your Sweeping Blade. Secondly, in teamfights, Sweeping Blade is Yasuo's best way to get onto enemy champions to keep dealing damage. It's also crucial that you use it to dodge enemy abilities, and keeping that in mind while positioning yourself to attack is rather hard. If you're fast enough, you can use it to dash through attacks like Malphite's Unstoppable Force and dodge skill shots like Blitzcrank's Hook or Camille's Hookshot. Another thing that will improve with many Yasuo games is your ability to navigate the early laning phase in tough matchups. Many champions like Orianna and Seraphine can bully you out with poke before you have the damage to all in them. Learning to use Sweeping Blade to dodge skill shots while not taking auto attacks and managing your passive cooldown are just a few ways that you can help minimize your losses in the early game. Laning in tough matchups can be quite difficult for more inexperienced players, and only the top of the ladder players are really great at it. Yasuo can suffer in the early game, so once you've clocked in the games, you'll find yourself having a much better laning phase. Lastly, Yasuo is extremely stylish. Swag zaddy. His outplays are beautiful to watch, and there's many ways you can absolutely style on people. Who doesn't want to win and look cool while doing it? If you do, you should pick up Yasuo as your main. Before we continue, make sure to join our Wild Rift Discord in the description below and subscribe to keep up with all updates relating to Wild Rift. Next up, we have the Yasuo of the jungle, Lee Sin. He's another stylish champion with countless ways to outplay people and a favorite among mechanical players. If you're looking for another champion to make big plays on and demonstrate how much better you are than your opponents, Lee Sin is perfect for you. First of all, Lee Sin's primary damaging ability, Sonic Wave / Resonating Strike, relies on Lee Sin landing a relatively easy to dodge skill shot. Making sure this hits your target in all situations is extremely important to finding success on Lee Sin. And while this may seem easy in early game duels when you're on top of the enemy jungler, as soon as you're in amongst minions, a few champions in a skirmish, or the enemy team, it can get quite difficult. Positioning yourself to give you the best chances of landing it or guaranteeing it landing by using Dragon's Rage are things you will learn to do as a Lee Sin main, and it will make your gameplay far smoother. Next, you have Lee Sin's passive, Flurry. After Lee Sin uses an ability, his next 2 basic attacks have increased attack speed and return energy. This might not seem that complicated upon first inspection. However, the implications for Lee Sin are bigger than you may think. Lee Sin has to constantly weave in auto attacks between his spells, and spacing them out to make full use of your passive is necessary for winning duels and optimizing your clear. This places great importance on how good your movement is and how good you are at weaving in auto attacks in your combos. This may seem simple, but doing it consistently well is no small task. Lee Sin's second ability, Safeguard or Iron Will, is easier to use than the PC version since it no longer needs to be unit targeted. However, it's still pretty difficult to use optimally, and a good Lee Sin will use it in creative ways to win skirmishes. If you commit Safeguard forwards without knowing the situation, you will often find yourself overextended and simply die with no escape. It's important to hold onto it until the opportune moment, but experienced Lee Sins will be able to judge when it's safe to use it aggressively to continue their combo and lay down some more damage. Lastly, Safeguard can also combine with Dragon's Rage for the combo known as Insect Kick. Dashing behind someone to kick them into your team is a famous move that has been around for years in the League of Legends community. And on the Wild Rift, it's no less powerful. Finding ways to send priority targets into your team can be game-winning, but more important, knowing when not to do it or how to escape afterwards can be more useful. The kick isn't too hard to execute mechanically, but it does rely on a baseline level of skill. However, it can get complicated fast, especially when you're changing up the ways that you dash in, saving dashes for escapes afterwards, and lining up the kick so that instead of going simply into your team, it also knocks up as many enemies as possible. There's many different ways for you to use Dragon's Rage, and finding the best kick in any situation is nearly impossible. Great Lee Sins will use Dragon's Rage to knock up entire teams when they can. Otherwise, they will simply pick off the enemy carries and set up their team for success. If any of this sounds fun to you, you should pick up Lee Sin. He's pretty strong right now, and every bit of time you put into him will show incredible improvement. Before we get into the rest of the video, our question of the day is, what champion do you think is the easiest to play and get wins on? Personally, I'm thinking Malphite because whenever someone new to the Baron lane plays him, they always seem to have a huge impact with his easy-to-use ultimate. But what do you guys think? Do you think Malphite is hard to play? Make sure to leave your answer in the comments below. Next up on our best champions to main list is Camille. She's made a small resurgence lately, and while not OP, she's been slowly working her way up the tier list. Anyways, let's move on to why she's a great champion to main. Camille doesn't have an extreme amount of innate complexity to her abilities, however, she rewards good mechanics and good fundamental gameplay quite heavily. First, we're going to go over why she rewards good mechanics. Camille relies quite heavily on auto attacks, and for any melee champion, this means that tight orb walking and good positioning is extremely important to finding success. Weaving in auto attacks and precision protocols and using your precision protocols to cancel your auto attacks quickly for maximum DPS isn't particularly complex, but if you're not up to scratch, you won't be pumping out much damage. There's always room to improve in this area and tighten up your gameplay, and even the best Wild Rift players will have a fair way to go. Camille's third ability, Hookshot, can sometimes be hard to hit. However, that's not the main reason why it rewards good mechanics. During Hookshot's first cast, before it hits a wall, you're still free to use Tactical Sweep, Precision Protocol, and auto attacks. There's a pretty neat trick where you can harass the enemy under tower by throwing the hookshot backwards and landing your second Precision Protocol just before it latches onto the wall, and you'll be pulled out to safety before the tower can retaliate. There's a bunch of different ways you can combine your abilities with hookshot, and learning to execute these smoothly is extremely challenging. There's many different situations you can face that will call for different game plans. Being able to decide which one to execute separates the good Camille's from the great. Camille's ultimate Hextech Ultimatum is fairly straightforward in usage. However, it grants Camille brief untargetability, which is great for dodging many different types of skill shots. Timing this well to get maximum value can at times be quite hard, but making good use of this can be game-changing. Lastly, Camille rewards good fundamentals because she's best utilized by pinning the enemy laner to their tower and then roaming with your strong gank potential. Camille is a huge split pusher, but trying to win the game in a fashion similar to Fiora is not your best play. In most games, the best play is to make sure the enemy laner always has minions to catch, and then you use that brief window of man advantage to take favorable fights and snowball the game from there. This is a fairly vague concept, however, once you learn how to execute it, you will have fully realized the power of Camille. If any of this sounds even slightly interesting to you, put some games into Camille and see how it feels. It might not all come together immediately, but push through the initial learning curve and you might just find something special. Valentine's Day is coming up, so you might find bang. Our fourth champion we're going to talk about today is Akali. She absolutely terrorized the Wild Rift at the beginning, and while she settled down somewhat, she's still pretty scary. Akali is a fearsome assassin that rewards smooth movement and precise micro with satisfying assassination and stylish outplays. The first thing that makes Akali difficult is her interaction between her passive, Assassin's Mark, and her first ability, 3-point strike. As Akali, you'll be chaining these together frequently, moving into range for 3-point strike, then backwards to ready your passive, then forwards to proc your passive, and for another 3-point strike, and so on. This is your bread and butter ability sequence for damage output, and learning to do this cleanly and without wasted movement can be super challenging. At a baseline level, Akali is quite hard to execute, and will often take tens of games just to get the hang of this simple combo. So it's not just you, it's her. Akali has tons of potential mind games she can play with her second ability, Twilight Shroud. It's pretty useful for the energy restore it gives, and the extra movement speed helps with chaining together her passive with 3-point strikes. However, the real skill expression comes in with your positioning within the shroud. While invisible, you can't be targeted, but you can still be hit by skill shots. You must advance towards the enemy to land your damage, but not in a predictable manner so they can retaliate with their own. It's a pretty precarious balance, and you must be where they do not expect you to be. However, if you move too far out of the way, you're losing out on your damage output. Optimizing these small movements is critical to good Akali play, and there's no straightforward answer to the best way to do it. There's a few other fancy combos you can do with your shuriken flip, and using it while you dash in with the first cast of perfect execution can help guarantee your combo. There's tons of depth to Akali's kit, and we've barely scratched the surface in this video. If you've never been able to understand what Akali does, or think that she looks really cool because she just does, you should hop into a game and start learning her. Our last champion we'll be discussing today is Ezreal. As with Akali, there's many different small ways you can optimize the champion to perform better. However, there's two main areas that will improve your Ezreal gameplay the most. The first area that can be quite hard to nail down at first is that most of your damage is reliant on landing your skill shots. Missing Mystic Shot is extremely punishing, as not having the cooldowns of all your abilities lowered substantially reduces the damage you can put out. Ezreal's skill shots aren't the hardest to hit in the game, but they are far from easy. Learning to land skill shots is one of the initial hurdles for most Wild Rift players, and Ezreal takes that to the extreme. Secondly, Ezreal's Arcane Shift may seem straightforward to use at first. However, there's a little trick that high elo players abuse that makes it quite OP. Arcane Shift has cast time before you actually blink to the end location. This means that if your reactions are fast enough, you can use it to blink away from abilities like Blitzcrank's Rocket Grab or Alistar's Headbutt Pulverize combo, even if they've already started to hit you. As long as you begin the cast before you get crowd controlled, you will move to the end location. Ezreal might not be the hardest marksman in the game, considering Draven exists. However, the baseline level of mechanics required to play him is still quite high, and every game you put into him will substantially improve your ability to land skill shots. When everything lands, Ezreal can be extremely satisfying, and overall is a great champion to main.
Ultimately, every champion has tons of depth to their kit. Just some champions tend to be more rewarding for the time you put into them. But that's all for our 5 best champions to main on patch 2.1. Thanks for watching, and make sure to like the video, sub to the channel, answer our question of the day, all that good jazz in the comments down below. And hey, good luck on the Wild Rift. Also, do you like my hair? I dyed it. Okay, bye. Ultimately, every champion has... Can we just do it? Why is that so hard?